My 13th online conference, The Making of the Black House. Hello, my fellow beings. Making education more enjoyable through storytelling has always been part of my artistic activities. As an auteur and a longtime activist against racism in general, and intellectual racism in particular, I use any means to get across my message. As many of us know, racism is not only a taboo subject, but it is more essentially a sensitive issue. Why? If the cause does exist, factually, why should the effect exist? That is all the problem. Race does not exist, but racism does, and it is conveniently disregarded, denied, or silenced? It does not make any sense, does it? So today's breaking news is, the cure against the disease of racism has been found. It is a moving and heartbreaking news, is it not? Thus following is the story of the woman who finally discovered the remedy against racism. Beisha is the imperative form of the verb to love. So Beisha means love them. Many of you began to anticipate the tricky aspect of such an explicit injunction, aren't you? Racial-wise, for instance, how can you love people who do not love you, and worse, find a tremendous joy in hurting you at many levels? Physical, emotional, mental, intellectual, and spiritual? Such a foresaid injunction is no longer an easy thing to deal with, is it? At the same time, if you go with the flow blindly, you will hurt yourself in a dangerous way. Irrevocably, you will be the big loser. Since the disease of racism hurts the racist as well as the victim, but because the racist mind is in its element, of course, the victim is likely to suffer the most. Therefore, it would be self-delusional to wait for a racist-minded person to bring change. I mean, a significant racial change. Consequently, complaining about racism is no longer enough. Taking action against racism is the pragmatic and rational approach. Following is the story of a Congo woman named Beisha, a woman whose life was so dramatically challenged by the multifaceted forms of racism that she finally found the missing remedy. How? Please, listen to the story and history of The Making of the Black House. Beisha's father wanted to become a medical doctor, but a missionary dissuaded him to study medicine. Why, Beisha's father inquired, and he was told that Africans, black people, Negro in short, were not sharp enough to deal with science. It was not their fault, it was congenital. So, Negroes were congenitally deficient, and there were no cure or nothing to do about that. Beisha's father got discouraged and persuaded, unfortunately. Afterward, he abandoned his heartfelt dream and became a forced gardener. Then, as he could never expect, the missionary found him relevant to take care of his immense backyard, which replenished with all sorts of fruits and vegetables. One day, upon a conversation with the missionary, Beisha's father discovered that the actually aging missionary knew perfectly his late father. Then the missionary confided that Beisha's grandfather wanted to become an architect, but the missionary was opposed to his dream. Since the art and science of architecture was mostly based on logic, precision, and accuracy. Unfortunately, black people or Negroes were not intelligent enough to excel in such intellectually challenging field of study. For that reason, Beisha's grandfather dropped forever his heartfelt dream and became a goat keeper. But, as you could never imagine, for many reasons, their native village became a pole of attraction of tourism. So, small businesses became very prosperous, and Beisha's grandfather seized that wonderful opportunity to improve his life and the well-being of many people financially. But, as he could never imagine, the missionary has already set his eyes on his prosperous business. The missionary stole Beisha's grandfather ideas and killed his financial momentum. Struggling with all kinds of misfortunes, Beisha's grandfather's health got deteriorated every single day till the predictable end occurred. In the meantime, the missionary was exploiting his ideas, and the almost ruined village started to revive with all sorts of businesses. Listening to the missionary, Beisha's father came to realize the underlying cause behind his father's legendary ruin and failure. Now, he got into the mind of the missionary and realized that the missionary was viscerally racist, and that racism was a well-organized and orchestrated game. Racism was a state of mind, a mindset powered by a superiority complex. Consequently, the evil game of racism asked for a superior category and an inferior underclass or category. It is what the hegemonic approach is about. Beisha's father dealt with and coped with the missionary's evil revelation, painfully, and that very day he decided to have an unprecedented conversation with her unique child. As their conversation was going on, Beisha's father shared everything he learned from the old missionary that day. In an emphatic and powerful attitude, he said to his daughter that in this story, the missionary's character factually exposed the issue of systematic racism, structural and institutional racism, as well as racism in general. Though the missionary's cautious tale may sound legendary, unfortunately, it is still an ongoing reality. During their conversation, they discussed about the issue of color and the mindset of those who get entangled in this powerful and delusion-based trap. Then, as a wonderful gardener, Baisha's father began to share his understanding of colors in a weird way. He said, "My dear daughter, I may surprise you, but colors are simply delusional. Imagine a green plant growing underneath a big tree, and its peer growing completely exposed to the sun rays. A simple observation will lead us to conclude that their level of concentration in chlorophyll, melanin, would be different. Likewise, skin color's pigment's intensity differ from black people and white people substantially, and from all the colors in between. Like in real life, geographically wise, some people are less exposed to the sun rays than others, are they not? Therefore, authentic Africans were dark-skinned for the very reason that they were the first human specimen. They could not survive the intensity of the African sun without an appropriate skin protection. The plant growing underneath a big tree is mostly pale-looking than its peer, completely exposed to the intensity of the sun. Naturally, the latter looks darker, deep green, does it not?" Listening to her father, Baisha, a student in biology, burst into laughter. "How genuine your reasoning, Dad," she commented and complimented. Then she added that she could never picture people's colors difference in such a funny but striking and thought-provoking way. Afterward, she tries to explain what she learned in school. Skin pigment in human evolved primarily to regulate the amount of ultraviolet radiation penetrating the skin, controlling its biochemical effects. Baisha's father looked at his daughter in a straightforward manner and then tried to repeat some of the words his daughter stated so emphatically. Words like biochemical effects, but he failed to repeat those complicated words for obvious reasons. As a result, both father and daughter laughed, in a friendly way. But soon the father teased his daughter in a sarcastic manner. He asked, "Was people's intelligence located in the color of their skin or in their brain?" He meant by brain their head. As their conversation unfolded, Baisha came to learn about her father's long-standing frustration about the taboo and sensitive issue of race. Time went by and the village deplored the loss of a dedicated and lovely hard worker man, Baisha's father. In meantime, the growing state of business attracted many people in the village, among them many missionaries. The old missionaries was central to such a powerful change. He had his business diversified in many sectors of activities, so he needed his own people to grow his business. Thus, villagers were abusively being exploited as unacknowledged slaves. They were working harder and harder, but were barely getting paid. The growing business got sophisticated and well organized into diversified interests group. In meantime, everything was done to degrade the educational system of the villagers, because knowledge meant power. The failing educational system prompted villagers to behave like survivors, and their challenging survival state got them trapped into a life of subordination and self-deprecating logic. They were taught to be followers, but certainly not leaders. Therefore, villagers were now dramatically falling behind, miserably, as they were lacking the two keys of empowerment, education and money. Missionaries, hermetically, controlled both key sectors pitilessly. Now, Baisha was a target of a young missionary who could not stand her eagerness to succeed at school. Thus, the young missionary did everything in his power to break her heartfelt dream of becoming a biologist researcher. Baisha was faced with all sorts of obstacles. Some unsuspected obstacles even came from her own people. Then she learned from life. Anyone who aspires to be successful should bear in mind three categories of enemies who will constitute a strong obstacle, a brake against their success.